Okay, welcome to Why New Hampshire Needs Food Hubs, Food Co-ops, and More Organic Growers, the third panel in our Northeast Food Security panel discussion series at NOFA New Hampshire's 20th Annual Winter Conference. I'm Laura Andrews, NOFA New Hampshire's Program Coordinator, and Amy Antonucci, NOFA New Hampshire Education Committee member, will be moderating the discussion this afternoon. First, please note that we're recording this session and all sessions throughout the conference. Many of the recordings are available to watch now, and you can find those links on the same page that you've been using to access these sessions on the website. And the rest of the recordings will be available soon, hopefully within the next couple days, definitely within the next week or so. Everyone we've muted during the workshop, so please type, or during the panel discussion, so please type your questions into the chat box along the way, and we'll read out your questions when we get to the Q&A portion of the session. NOFA New Hampshire's Winter Conference is supposed to foster an open, welcoming environment and a safe space for everyone, so please keep your questions and comments constructed in the chat. For technical issues or for instructions on how to access closed captions, please feel free to communicate publicly through the chat or message us privately, message me directly. And finally, before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that this conference is taking place on the land of the Pennacook tribe, or Endakina, the Abenaki word for the traditional ancestral homeland of the Abenaki and Wabanaki peoples, past and present. And we acknowledge and honor with gratitude the land and waterways and the Alnobak, or people, who have stewarded this land through the generations. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers. So today we have Allan Reetz, who is the Director of Public and Government Affairs at the Hanover Co-op Food Stores and Auto Service Centers of New Hampshire and Vermont. Caitlin Porter, co-owner of Waking Web Farm, a no-till, chemical-free, small-scale CSA-based farm in Milton Mills, and coordinator for the New Hampshire Food Hub Network. Lauren Howard is co-founder and co-executive director of the Kearsarge Food Hub, a nonprofit organization centered in the Kearsarge area of New Hampshire, which seeks to inspire and reinvigorate rural communities by promoting and supporting a restorative local food system. And Gene Jonas, who has been farming in the Monadnock region with his wife, Marilyn, since 2009, and they own and operate Hungry Bear Farm. And Amy Antonucci of Living Land Permaculture Homestead will be moderating the discussion, and I will pass it over to her now.
Great, thank you, Laura. I'm really happy to be here with you all today to help facilitate such an important discussion. I think it's clear to most of us by now that the problems we currently live with are bigger than any one of us, that are in fact built into the systems that we're living in. So making that sort of systemic shift is going to be something we all do together. And the folks here today are already involved in just that. The first question that we are posing to them today is, what are the benefits of the social structure or structures that you are representing today? Allan, can you start us off?
Sure. Thank you very much, Amy. And it's a real honor to be part of this conversation. So I represent a food cooperative. Cooperatives have been around for hundreds of years, thousands of years when you think of the model. But in the case of the current cooperative model, we are centered on 7 cooperative principles. And those principles are where we get our benefits from. I won't go through the entire list of all 7, but they are really followed around the world. And Laura will put a link to the principles on our website. It's labeled as How Our Co-op Works. But I want to spend a moment on that for a moment with a touch of history. The modern cooperative food movement began in the 1840s in Rochdale, England. It was a period called the Hungry 40s because people were so hungry. The mill workers were under the thumb of large merchants, and they had to buy their food from the stores owned by those merchants. And when they went to buy their flour for bread, it was diluted with plaster. They weren't buying true flour. It had mostly plaster within it. If they bought tea for drinking, the tea leaves, you would drink your tea, and at the bottom of the cup with those leaves would be lead shavings, because the lead made the tea weigh more when you went to buy it. So these workers knew that they had to take control of their food system. So they formed what became a food cooperative. They saved their money, they studied how to do it. And over the course of a few years, they became successful. And they established 7 principles, of which we closely follow today. Those principles include open and voluntary membership. So that's equitable, right? Democratic member control. Even if I buy at the Hanover Co-op, if I buy $1,000 worth of food every year and you buy $50 worth of food every year, your vote is the same as mine. It's not like a shareholder company where the more shares, the more votes you get. Here's a key point: education, training, and information. Cooperatives are so focused on making sure that we teach ourselves how to be business people. We teach consumers information that they need to know, and we train our teams, and that's critical. Another point I'll touch on and wrap up is concern for community. No business can thrive in a failing community, and I'll swing back to that in a few minutes, but a lot of my work falls within concern for community, and I focus on affordable workforce housing issues, small scale agriculture, and community transportation. So those are some of the benefits that arise out of the co-op model for us.
Thank you so much, Allan. Caitlin, can you now answer that question? What
Yeah,
are the
thank you.
benefits?
And thank you, Allan. That was awesome. I think I just learned a couple new things myself. So yeah, to dive in, I'll be wearing kind of 2 hats today, trying to keep it quick answers for both. Although I'm literally wearing my farmer hat today, I'll be representing both Waking Web Farm and the New Hampshire Food Hub network. So on the farm side, I'm going to be a 2nd year owner of brand new, very small scale farm, CSA based farm in Milton Mills, New Hampshire. And on the Food Hub network side, to summarize it up, our work is essentially working with 6 food hubs statewide, along with some support organizations that come together to leverage Food Hub collaboration, to create best practices and to create financially sustainable transactions. So on the farm side, some benefits of the social structure that represents is that Waking Web is a very soil health focused farm. We kind of have come across, use a little slogan called nourishing our neighbors. And we really take that as, starting with the very microbes in the soil, and then we work within all of the scales of our neighbors. So we try to feed our neighbors, nourish them through creating community connections. We're trying to have potlucks, and we host an open house at the beginning of the year, and we have various volunteer parties throughout the season. So nourishing our neighbors, we kind of take with, not only physically nourishing, but also socially nourishing our neighbors. And another benefit is we are strong believers in CSA model as a model that really works for us, and I know a number of other farms, to create farm viability. It's really a working model that helps with the cash flow throughout the year, and it really bonds that connection of your consumers. We build a relationship with our buyers in a more intimate way. So we think that that's a real benefit that the farm provides, as well as rural access to food, which is something I'll touch upon in another part of this conversation. And from the Food Hub perspective, we've got the very obvious benefits of really just moving more local food around the state. We're creating efficiencies. We're learning from each other's experience. And it's a group that really comes together over collaboration, over competition, which can really help solve some more complex issues. It's creating accountability with each other. And I think long-term, it even has the power to heighten the standards of food safety in the state.
Great, thank you so much, Caitlin. Lauren, can we hear from you on the benefits of the social structure?
Hi, I'm Lauren from Kearsarge Food Hub. Kearsarge Food Hub is a community-based, not-for-profit organization. We envision a resilient and connected community where everyone is empowered to access healthy food, where local farmers are supported and the land is nourished, and where all people share a common sense of place. Now, there are many different types of food hubs out there, and our farm is different than a lot of the food hubs in the network that Caitlin was talking about. We really do focus on community building and community partnerships, cooperation over competition, also like Caitlin said. And specifically, our mission is to reinvigorate our community within a restorative local food system by cultivating food sovereignty, growing engaged learners, and nurturing community. In large part, we do this work through our 3 primary branches: Sweet Beet Farm, Sweet Beet Market, and the newest beet, Sweet Beet Cafe. Like many farms and gardens, Sweet Beet Farm provides not only a place to cultivate nourishing food in sustainable and even regenerative ways, but also to encourage a deeper connection with our own nature and our relationship to the natural world. So as a fundamentally educational farm, it also serves to provide opportunities to students, volunteers, and aspiring farmers to learn about regenerative practices and to be inspired to reconnect with our food, our planet, ourselves, and each other. Our market and cafe, on the other hand, serve as a consistent and reliable points of access to foods made available by local and regional farmers and food vendors, a lot of which we're connected with through our relationship with food hubs in the state and within the region. They're also vibrant and energizing community gathering spaces. They help us in our community to connect, to engage, and to inspire each other. We try to address affordability, which is a significant barrier to access to local foods. To that end, we've established a food security program that's supported by all 3 of those branches, all 3 of the Sweet Beets. Just as some examples of benefits of that, in 2021, we opened a community fridge in partnership with our town's food pantry that provides 24/7 access to food from our market and cafe and farm, as well as other partnering farms, free of charge and no questions asked. We also accept SNAP and EBT and provide 2-for-1 pricing on fruits and vegetables through New Hampshire Food Bank's Granite State Market Match program, which is a federally funded program as well. We also donate fresh seasonal produce and other foods to area food pantries on a weekly basis, year-round. Last year alone, we were able to donate over 20,000 pounds of produce, over $45,000 worth of local goods. So in terms of the benefits, we think there are a lot. We try to do a lot of different things to address access, connection, community. To that end, we also work with a number of community partners and networks, just like a lot of these organizations, these farms, to help us identify opportunities for collaboration and increase our impact. We're continuously working to recognize and identify our blind spots and improve upon the work that we do for the benefit of the communities we serve. Another part of this is, it's a deeply community-oriented effort, and our ability to do this work depends entirely on the ongoing support and participation of many different contributors within our community: donors, customers, mentors, volunteers, farmers and producers, other vendors, and food access partners. The participation and appreciation for the value of the work that KFH and like organizations provide is truly what fuels the people here and the work that we do. And no matter how challenging it may become, how tired we may grow. It's the support of our community that constantly shows us that that our continued growth and success is dependent on connection and community support. So we simply couldn't do it without that support.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Jean, you.
Oh, those are tough acts to follow, but I'll do my best here. Thanks for having me today. I'm glad to be speaking with you all. So I wrote out my answers here, so let me get to them. Okay, so since 2009, we have worked diligently and very hard to grow our farm to the point where it is at today. Our CSA members, many of whom who have been with us for years, know that we deliver to them a great number of different types and varieties of produce and some value-added products for a reasonable cost, and have done so for several years. We continue to innovate and expand our farm slowly each year. For instance, last year, we grew many types of flowers for the first time and made them available on pickup day for people to cut if they wanted to, no additional cost. People come out on pickup day and often they end up talking with each other, which is really nice to see a lot of times, asking questions and communicating with us, which helps develop trustful relationships. Yeah, we grow some really nice produce for all who wish to enjoy it, but we also do our part to foster and build community through our CSA and just our farming operation. I would say that food security within communities is also becoming more important. Just witness the often sparsely stocked shelves at supermarkets. Some items are getting harder to find, even seemingly simple items. The other day I was in there looking for some lasagna and cat food, and I couldn't find any at our market basket. As issues like pandemics, climate change, and the growing wealth divide rage on, it's becoming apparent to anyone that's paying attention that more social structures like community-based farms will be necessary in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Thank all of you for those. Really, we're off to a great start. The next question that we have is, what current problems are you trying to solve? And why are the food hubs, co-ops, farms that you're involved with such a positive development in dealing with those problems? Allan, can we have you start us off?
Sure, thanks. And you know, there are so many problems to pick from these days, and that actually makes it difficult. And frequently we can get lost in the details, but cooperatives are a centering point. It is a positive element of our business model, and I'm going to reflect a little bit more on history in a second, but to talk about the key ones that are on my to-do list right now, among many, would be GMO labeling. This has just hit, without going into all the details, on the store shelves, how USDA implemented the policies around genetically modified foods is really challenging and problematic. I won't go into all the details, but that's a big one. Origin of livestock, this one feels like my middle name. I say it so much, and I know I am not alone. It has been devastating to our dairy industry. So these are problems. Where co-ops come back in is on that education, training, and information. And as I said, that goes back to the 1840s. And from our archives, I pulled out a few things. So here's the old school way of my sharing a screen. This is our newsletter from 1961, where co-ops around the country were pressuring USDA about the water added to ham, and there was no labeling. That when you go into a deli today, sometimes you'll see water added. Well, there was a period of time where the USDA was not pushing through those policies and regulations. Here's one a little more recent, 1987. Silent Spring, 25 years later, not letting old issues rest, bringing it up to the present. This is the newsletter of Cornucopia. They reached out to us to do an interview on how we are approaching the Danone thing. So those are some of the problems, and that's how we respond. You know, and I'll wrap it up by saying, as I prepared for this event, I dropped onto your website, Amy, Living Land Permaculture, and jumped into some of the writing that you do. So there's always this learning. You had a great article there from Tom Wessels on resilient communities and an ecological perspective. So to me, a co-op is in the position of latching on to the great thoughts that other people put out there. We are this network. So when I think of your work or Lauren's or collaborating with Caitlin and learning from Jean, we are constantly in that. I think it's worth dropping those two websites into the chat if we can do that. But the Mr. Wessel's view of seeing us as an ecological system with interdependencies, some redundancy and specialization, but together we make it work. And for our cooperative, we're an $88 million business, but we must always remember our grassroots. So that's some of the positive benefits and some of the problems we're striving to solve.
Thank you, Allan. Caitlin, go ahead.
Great, thanks. Yeah, again, I'll just try to do two kind of focused answers from a farmer and the Food Hub Network perspective. At Waking Web, we obviously, as Allan said, there are so many problems that you could hone in on. And for this, I'm going to focus on two that we are really trying to address at our farm. And one is food access in rural places. So we live kind of in the middle of nowhere, right on the border of Maine. I'm about 25 to 30 minutes from the nearest Hannaford's. So I think food access, comes in so many different forms. And I think we're really trying to establish a need for access in both a financial perspective and a geographic perspective. So financially, it's really a part of what we do is food access. So we've gone through and become SNAP accepting, and we have the Granite State Market Match as well. This year, we're expanding upon this idea of food access and trying to reach larger targeted audiences by implementing a sliding scale payment program. So that's on the financial end. And then this very real geographic physical access to foods is another thing. When you live in rural towns, we are providing our neighbors food that, perishable food that otherwise they'd be having to travel 25-30 minutes to get from a grocery store, which prevents longer trips. And hopefully, if they just have to drive 5 minutes down the road to get their vegetables for the week, maybe they can push off their grocery store run to just a couple times a month to pick up non-perishable items, which kind of leads to this other problem that we're trying to address, which is climate resilience. Really thinking of ways that our soil can be used as a carbon sink. So we practice no-till, as well as really using no chemicals, kind of above and beyond organic certification, and using the soil as a way to sequester carbon back into our soils to help mitigate climate change. And then, sorry, that's from the farm perspective. The Food Hub world, the problems we're trying to solve there are mainly inefficiencies in the food system. So we are trying to prevent each food hub individually trying to recreate the wheel. If we can have me kind of overseeing these 6 food hub entities and identify some resources that I could help create that then 6 food hubs get to benefit from, it just leads to this whole other level of efficiencies that we're hoping to tap into, which will in turn really help these food hubs save in labor costs. And in general, we're trying to increase efficiencies for trucking and transportation to distribute more food around the state. And in the end, I think our goal is to have less trucks on the road with fuller loads. And from the perspective of the Food Hub network, having 6 entities come together, we're really able to plan and have that perspective where they're able to collaborate so that less trucks are on the road with fuller loads.
That's awesome. Thank you, Caitlin. Lauren, I'm going to turn to you next. And just to let folks know, Lauren had a little glitch. So her picture is in one box and her voice is from another. So that you are seeing it correctly. Go ahead, Lauren. Lauren, we can't hear you. There you go.
All right. Thank you. So problems that we are trying to solve. Access and affordability is certainly a major one for us. We're committed to, we and other food hubs are committed to providing access to local and regional foods. Seasonality is a big feature there. And you know, in food hubs versus typical distributors, mission and impact are you know, far and away more important than profit. And I think that, you know, financial sustainability, financial viability is a different story, but mission and impact centered work is kind of what differentiates food hubs in a lot of ways. Seasonality is certainly part of that. It can also be a limitation, but serves as an opportunity for education about how the industrial food system and globalization and consumerism can result in problems like climate resilience that Caitlin was talking about as well. Community and connection, as I said before, is another big aspect that we try to address. We aspire to provide points of connection between eaters and the people who grow and produce the foods that we eat, as well as the place that it comes from. We meaning food hubs, and KFH being one of those. We do put in a lot of time and hard work to tell stories and share experiences that build a sense of community and connection and communicate the true value of these foods. We reference value chains rather than supply chains because there's much more than products transactionally being passed down through these systems. Allan spoke earlier of transparency and trust and the importance of source identification, labeling, disclosure of things like growing practices, and accurate and truthful statements about what is being produced and how. Also prioritizing local vendors that we have relationships with is something that our customers really trust us to do. You know, they trust that we have gone to the effort of connecting with and learning about the farms that we work with. And that's a big part of what Sweet Beet specifically represents and stands for. The aging farming population is another area that we're working to play our part in. The Food Hub started from 5 young folks learning how to farm and taking that learning and education and continuing to develop that and share that. And we've recently developed, as part of our on farm education programming, a farmer apprentice program where we're trying to grow farmers. That's in direct response to the aging farming population and the issues of farm succession. Climate, ecology, and slow food are also areas that what we do really seeks to address. Sustainable and regenerative farming practices are what we focus on at Sweet Beet Farm, and that's what we try to share with students, volunteers, and our community through social media and other kinds of messaging. I'll leave it at that. We've got our hands full.
Thank you, Lauren. Jean, go ahead.
Okay. We are providing a wide variety of nutritious produce at Hungry Bear Farm, grown to or above organic standards for anyone in our community who really wants to join our CSA. We're trying to help feed the community in such a way that keeps the environment in a healthy state, especially focusing on soil health. I don't believe food has to be grown with persistent synthetic toxins. And, you know, by doing that, it's doing things the industrial way, really wreaking havoc on the ecosystems. We're driving up healthcare costs. There's a lot of hidden costs in the cost of food. Industrial ag also emits loads of greenhouse gases. So I've heard anywhere from 10 to 47% worldwide. So, I mean, depends on how you look at it. But it's not a sustainable model, and we're killing the planet by doing things that way. So I would never farm that way, for sure. We are proving that our method of growing and distributing is pandemic proof. There were no supply chain issues at Hungry Bear Farm once the pandemic hit. Farms like ours offer their communities the benefit of chemical-free products grown with integrity by people who care. You know, farming isn't easy. As one older gentleman farmer told me one time, farming is a great way of life, but not a great way to make a living. We make enough to get by money-wise in this system. It's not about money. It's, you know, kind of corny to say a labor of love, but maybe also a love of labor, because I'm working my butt off all the time once the season starts. But you got to believe in what you do, and we do, and I'm glad to be able to do it. Truthfully, it's a very meaningful job to me. So I think everyone else said everything that needs to be said. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you, Gene. I love that, a labor of love and a love of labor. I think probably everyone here can embrace that idea. Okay, our next question is, what advice would you give to those in the room who might want to start or get involved with a farm, food hub, co-op, whatever you represent? And Allan, I'm going to ask you again to start us off.
Great. The advice would be take time to observe and understand the ecosystem. You know, our cooperative was founded in 1936 by 17 families who wanted the same thing that the people in the 1840s did, better quality food at fair prices. In the founding document of this organization, they stated, it shall be the policy of the club, because it was a consumers club at the time, to buy from local merchants as much as possible and to avoid economic strife and price wars. Within weeks of making those statements, they were finding sources of goods, and they were also paying attention to things like fair labor practices. So these things hold true. But as far as the advice goes, and I want to add that they studied the cooperative model for 5 years before they began. So I don't know that you necessarily have to take that much time. But we go back to the systems example from that Tom Wessel's article. And I was thinking about another great thinker, Donella Meadows, and she said that take learning in small steps, constant monitoring, be willing to change course. You know, we have to find a sustainable relationship with nature and institutions. We can't do it from trying to conquer them. So as Donella said, before you disturb the system in any way, watch how it behaves. If it's a social system, watch it work, learn its history, ask people who've been around a long time to tell you what's happened. So whether you're trying to start a food co-op or join one or take a more active role in some aspect of the food economy, your ideas are welcome. Your energy is certainly critical to the goals we all are seeking to reach. But it's also time to, like Wessels points out, understand that ecosystem as best you can, knowing that it is very complex and interrelated. And I think that's the best way to get involved with a food co-op. And I'd say with many of the other things we're talking about in this NOFA conference.
Beautiful. Thank you, Allan. The observe and interact, the first principle of permaculture. Caitlin, you're up.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I've got 3 pieces of advice that I'd love people to leave this room with. And those are start small. We all have to play the long game. Sustainability means that it has to be sustainable for you financially, physically, and mentally. And this has really been a key component to me and my business partner who has started this farm. We're pretty debt averse, and So we have managed to avoid it thus far because we're growing excruciatingly slow over time. And that's working for us. And so I think that can take many different molds, and but that's my suggestion, is start small and think long term. When in doubt, collaborate. So I actually just moved back from living on the West Coast for 7 years, and in my last year in Washington, I was privileged to be a part of a group of farmers who came together to form a collaborative, and the agreement was that by coming together, each farm was assigned 1 month of the year, and in that 1 month you got to host a work party that every other farm showed up at. So, you know, if we raised a greenhouse, we'd have 40 people showed up. If, you know, we each got to really hone in on a large project that was not capable of being done by any one farm. And I really want to bring some of that collaborative energy from the West Coast to the East Coast and really say that, you know, we can't operate in a vacuum. The problems that we're up against are too complex. It's very easy to get overwhelmed, and the best way to deal with that, I think, is really just think outside the box. Who else is in your ecosystem doing similar things or has similar passions? How can we save seeds together? How can we create crop rotations that are, you know, even managing with multiple farms? Think outside the box, call up other farmers, gardeners, community members, start coming together on some of these issues. And the last one is use resources at UNH. I am an employee of UNH, so I am biased, but from a farmer perspective and employee perspective, my eyes have been really opened over the last 6 months about all the resources that are at the fingertips of everyone in New Hampshire. They're an amazing resource, anywhere from UNH Extension, internship programs that they offer, all the way down to the farm products map that they update. So I just want to encourage people to take advantage of these resources that are available to us, and be in touch if you have any questions. I would be happy to be a resource. If you send me an email, if I don't know who to point you in the direction of, I'm sure someone at the Sustainability Institute or the New Hampshire Food Alliance certainly will. So I'm happy to share my email in the chat.
Thanks, Caitlin. Lauren, you ready?
All right. Yeah, so from this kind of community-based, community-oriented food hub perspective, some advice from, you know, the experiences that I've had and what I've learned from that. Number one, there are many different kinds of food hubs out there. Step one is to see what's already being done and find the right model, one that suits both you and your team, as well as the community that you're looking to serve. You know, kind of akin to what Caitlin was saying about the importance of sustainability being, you know, what is also sustainable for each of us individually as people. It's really important that the models that we choose are well suited to the ecosystem that we're in. Number two, I would say, is get clear on your values and the value you want to contribute through your activities. Identifying needs and assessing how your vision can contribute to those needs will set you off on the right foot. Understanding both the opportunities and barriers presented by the location you choose and the community that you choose to serve will likely shape your model and inform how you can best deliver value and enact change. Cultivating interest and buy-in from the community that you serve is also vitally important. It can be really hard work and requires a lot of time, a lot of curiosity, and humility. Engaging with farmers to learn and appreciate what it takes to farm, figuring out what you can do to help support our growers will also serve in the long run. And then lastly, always be open to opportunities, but know when to say no, or not right now, but please keep asking. Kind of akin to what Caitlin was saying, starting small and not getting in over our heads is how we stick it out in the long run to address all of these huge problems that we're all trying to improve. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. Great advice. Jean.
Okay, this might be my longest answer, but I'll try to keep it short. Okay, in starting a farm, I listed out like 6 things here. So number 1, I listed is get some experience working on a farm if you can. If you don't have experience, get enough experience so that you feel comfortable knowing enough to try to make a go of it. Reading books is fine, but nothing beats actual experience in order to learn a skill, and farming is a skill. Also, if you can, ask questions to those that you're working for, attend conferences, network, watch YouTube videos, listen to podcasts, learn from everyone and everywhere possible if you lack knowledge in key areas. Number 2 is acquire capital. You know, if you're going to be buying, that's one thing. If you might be renting or leasing, either way, you're going to have some money. So land prices have gone up again recently, as everyone probably has noticed. So there's loans, grants, you might have some savings, you might win the lottery, whatever, get some money. Find access to land. This and the acquisition of capital are the 2 biggest barriers into entry into farming. Make sure that the land is not too far away from the markets you want to serve, or else figure on driving a lot. Check out the infrastructure of the land. Does it have access to good water? Is there some infrastructure in place? If you're going to be a vegetable farmer and, you know, there's no hoop houses up, the NRCS Equip program gives it at least one high tunnel to everyone that applies, from my experience. You know, if you find some land, it might be marginal, so you might have to regenerate it. Learning how to do that through compost, manure, cover cropping, you're going to have to put some effort into that. And always get a soil test done if you're going to be using it for crops. Next thing, one of the first things I did, truthfully, was write a business plan. And I was presented this opportunity down in Lowell, Mass. This was part of the New Entry Sustainable Farming Project, which is part of Tufts University. I think they're still there. Anyway, it was a free class back in 2009. And we wrote a business plan in 6 weeks. And, you know, creating this plan, you get to analyze the nuts and bolts of what's actually needed to run this business. Writing this plan, you'll decide on a business structure. You know, are you going to be for-profit, non-profit, et cetera? You know, understanding the pros and cons of each is a good thing. The plan will make sure you're able to sell your product. I don't believe in the field of dreams theory of build it and they will come. You got to do your homework and research about the area where you plan to sell. You know, it's people, the existing markets, the need for what you're trying to sell. So the business plan will cover a lot. You might need workers. I know we do, and it's a yearly search for decent help. You know, so factor that in. And like I think Caitlin said, start out simply. Don't do too much too fast. I've seen more than one farm around here grow too fast and then not be able to keep up with the pace. And their quality suffered as a result of it, and they're now out of business. So there might be more things I haven't thought of, but I think that's enough. Thanks.
Sure, Jean, that is a great list. There's always something more to think of and say, but that's fabulous. All right, so I'm going to remind everyone to use the chat to put your questions. Now we're going to be taking questions from everyone. And we already have one, and this one is going to be for Allan. So Allan, Kathy wants to know this. If I go into my local co-op, which is part of the Hanover co-op food stores? Will I soon be able to see local dairy products available? And will you be boycotting Danone products?
Well, you could always find local products available. We have been selling the goods of Stratford Organic Creamery and of course Butterworks Farm. We were early vendors and retailers for the Lasers product. This is actually a picture that I showed in a conversation with Gary Hirschberg 2 weeks ago when we were talking about the Northeast Organic Family Farm Partnership. And Gary looked at that and he said, you know what? That label on that Stonyfield yogurt right there is their very first product. And he said, I'll guarantee you, I delivered that load of yogurt. So you will find and always have found local and dairy products, organic products. On the boycotting of the Danone issue, that's a great question. It's one that was posed to me by Roger Noonan 2 days after the Danone announcement, and it actually came up in that cornucopia interview that I mentioned, and it's actually published in that that conversation. Our view is if we were to boycott the Danone, the few Danone products that we have right now, we are also doing away with milk that is currently being sourced from local and regional farmers who are still supplying based on those contracts. And those contracts have been extended by 6 months. So this boycott question is a very important one we thought long and hard about. And I've also had the same conversation with National Organic Coalition with Abby Youngblood down there. So it's a critical issue. Right now, I know farmers like, a close farmer, Jordy, up in the North Country, who is supplying the Danone contract. I really don't want to boycott milk that came from his farm and stop sales of it right now. So that's a quick-ish question on a very complex issue.
Thank you, Allan. Does anyone else of the panelists have anything more on that? I'm assuming this was more for Allan. Okay, yeah. Okay, well, this is sort of more the form of a comment, but I'm going to see if you all have anything to say about it. Joan is talking about how the New Hampshire Department of Agriculture has not been that helpful, that when she reached out to them, they would say, yeah, it's not my job. They didn't want to engage. And she would like to see more farmers and groups working on that. Do any of you have experiences or thoughts on how to get the New Hampshire Department of Agriculture to be more useful to us? All right. I bet they, oh, Jean, go ahead. Jean, did you?
I just have to bite my tongue on that one. I don't want to get myself in trouble.
Okay.
I don't feel the question should go unanswered because I don't want to make it sound like I'm clueless and I have no idea. I know that certainly collaborating with Caitlin and others through the New Hampshire Food Alliance, we have been through extensively involved in conversations with the Department of Agriculture. Our business sits on 2 states. We have stores both in Vermont and New Hampshire. The differences in funding of those departments of agriculture is as stark as you might imagine it is. So without understanding the specific issues that Joan is bringing up, I will say the capabilities, bandwidth, charter of the New Hampshire Department of Agriculture versus what Anson Tebbets and his team is funded with, their charter, their complexity is very, very different. So as far as advice, I don't have any particular advice. If I knew more about the issue offline, maybe I could chime in, but that's my observation.
Also, I know Allan has been in on this recently too. There's some ARPA fund requests that have been made to the commissioner recently. So I have not been on those recent Zooms. I don't know the conversations that have recently taken place. I've seen the documentation for the ask. And perhaps Alan or Caitlin can speak more to what's being asked. We're trying to get some ARPA funds directed to the DAMP in New Hampshire to help us out.
Yeah, in brief, I'll just touch on it briefly. This is a collection of advocates. This is the ecosystem we're talking about. There are voices from around the state who are trying to identify ways that we can take federal funding and channel it into key programs in a state that doesn't have the same infrastructure to go ahead and just bring in a bunch of money. So we're collaborating, we're looking for need, we're listening, we're studying, we're being humble. So yeah, there is this effort to do that. It is all in still somewhat the early stages, but I think it reflects everything we've been talking about since we started at 3 o'clock.
Caitlin, did you want to add anything? You're on.
Sure, I will just say that, yeah, from my own experience, it feels very much like a capacity issue and a funding issue. And I think that's more reflective of how the state chooses to spend money rather than necessarily targeting, the Department of Ag. I've personally, the few interactions I've had with the Department of Ag have been nothing but positive, and also it's just starkly clear, like Allan was saying, that it is a capacity issue at this time. And yeah, I think that's it.
Well, that's greatly helpful to know. Really interesting, and really good to hear that folks are trying to work with them and see, again, how to make the ecosystem healthier for all. Allan, did you want to add?
I will just add that we've had very open communications, again, without knowing specifics of other people's examples or experiences. We have found Commissioner Jasper to be very eager to engage and take issues not just beyond his desk and his office, but to the attention of others. So that's my experience, and I think that of others that we're working with.
Awesome, thank you. That is great to hear. We have another question here. What can we do, all of us, I guess, to educate eaters and consumers and to increase community support for the different sorts of organizations that you all are representing? Do you have specifics on that? Allan, do you want to start that off?
Could you just repeat that question for me? I was briefly distracted.
What can we do to educate consumers and increase community support for the work and the systems that we're talking about today?
This will sound overly simple, but it's key. It is show up and stay involved. The failure of communication is the assumption that it's taken place. We're all busy people. There are many distracting issues within our society today, to say nothing of the pandemic thing. But when it comes to supporting the networks we're talking about, those on this event today are right there. They're tuned in. They're taking the time on a Saturday to stay with it. David Zuckerman, former and hope to be soon again Lieutenant Governor of the state of Vermont, once spoke at our annual meeting and said, democracy is something that it's like exercise. You got to carve out 15 to 20 minutes a day or a few times a week, every week, to go ahead and stay involved with it. Agriculture, our food systems are the same way. If it strikes you here, and you got places like the Kearsarge Food Hub or a great local farm like Jean's, or tapping into UNH's resources, that's what you need to do. And the more you do, the more you will really be involved in this ecosystem.
Jean?
Yeah, when the word educate came up in that question, my brain lit up. So for years, I've been advocating for more education, especially on the consumer side. I've been diving into something called true cost accounting this winter. And it basically tries to analyze holistically a food system and analyze the true costs of producing the food. You know, it's one thing to pay a price at market basket for, you know, cheap apples or what's perceived to be cheap, but how that apple was grown at, under what conditions, you know, these are things that are often called externalities, which are allowed through policy to happen, and it affects all of society. There's one statistic that says we spend, I think it's the US when I say we, it's not in front of me, so I'm trying to remember it. We spend like $1.1 trillion a year on food, but when all the negative externalities are factored in, greenhouse gas emissions, biodiversity loss, healthcare costs, we spend over $3 trillion in our food system because of the way it's grown and its effects on our ecosystems, on our bodies. So this has to be educated, told to people, in my opinion, educate the consumers. And they may choose to, you know, take it to heart or ignore it or whatever, but at least let them know. You know, there are different ways of producing food, and some are much more eco-friendly than others. You know, also the farm workers in this country, and you study what happens in these cases. Often they're, you know, undocumented immigrants, and I mean, these people are treated pretty horribly a lot of times, and have throughout history been treated that way. You know, go into the confined animal feedlot operations and check out that situation. You know, there's only a few people at the top of these corporations that make all the money here. I'm going to get going on our for-profit predatory capitalist system, so I have to shut myself up because this is a real topic that I'm passionate about, educating the people. Thanks.
Thanks, Gene, and we appreciate that. And I sometime we'll have even more time to delve deeper. But we are really quickly coming up on 4 p.m. here. That went fast, as always. So I need to just say thank you to our 4 panelists and to everyone who came to engage in this discussion and who, you know, wants to make the changes and push us all in a different direction that we know will be so much better in so many ways. And Laura, I'm going to hand it on to you to wrap up.
Great, thank you. So thank you all so much for your time and for spending your Saturday afternoon with us. We hope you'll join us for our keynote speech with Mia Story of the National Family Farm Coalition and North American Marine Alliance, and that starts at 4:30. And she'll be talking about how collaboration and interdependence equals self-reliance. And I will pop the workshop links in the chat in just a moment. Please support our conference exhibitors by checking out our virtual Green Market Fair and conference bookstore hosted by Main Street Bookends. And finally, if you're joining us for the first time, please mark your calendars for our upcoming programs, NOFA New Hampshire's Farm Bill listening session on February 17th, and our Feeding the Family Organic Gardening series starting February 2nd. That's 6 sessions every other week through May 3rd. And also check out our bulk order program to save on farming and gardening supplies. The order deadline is at the end of this month, February 28th. With pickup on March 19th and 20th in Andover, New Hampshire, Ware, and Rochester. And thank you all again for joining us. Thank you for a great conversation.